morning and welcome to day 2 of Red Cloud Securities Oktoberfest conference. It gives me pleasure to introduce Simon Mitchell, Managing Director of Southern Gold. I'm going to quickly go through some disclosures and then I'm going to let Simon get right into the presentation and the update on Southern Gold. With respect to Southern Gold, you can see their disclosures on page 2 of Simon's presentation. And then with respect to Red Cloud Securities, I would just like to highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. And we note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigative work to make their own decisions on investments. And with that out of the way, Simon, please take it away.
No worries. Thanks very much, Andrew. And a good disclaimer, as always, when you're looking at our space. Look, I'll launch. I'm going to assume in this presentation that there are quite a few people looking at this that perhaps are a little bit surprised about the possibility of gold in Korea. How is that possible? And what's the context? And give people a very good sense of the unique opportunity that we have there in country. There is the disclaimer. And when you boil it down to brass tacks, what is Southern Gold all about? And basically, we pitch ourselves as a unique country play. We're really the only game in town in terms of active foreign gold explorer in country. We don't really have any other rivals there. And we are all about the discovery and definition of high-grade precious metal deposits. That's why we're there. We've got a very strong technical conviction that it's just a matter of time before we come across something that's significant. And there are a number of unique features about this story that give us this very high confidence. And what are the keys to that? And I've listed them there in 5 kind of very high-level points. And we hope to touch on these in the presentation in the next sort of 15 minutes or so. Fundamentally, it's about the geology. And really, we're in a unique part of the world which hasn't really seen much exploration. And what we're trying to bring to this story is a certain exploration culture that's really going to do the jurisdiction justice. We've got a very strong opinion in our technical group that there has been very little dollars spent in Korea in terms of exploration, and there's a lot to be found there. So we love the jurisdiction. It's got secure tenure, brilliant place to operate, and when you look at the way we work, we call it a boots-on-the-ground culture. It's also a very drill-focused company. So you'll find out a little bit about the kind of corporate DNA, if you will, and what makes us tick as a company. And then, of course, the last point, always very important with a junior, is the amount of funding available. We're well-funded, and when I get to the back end of the presentation, I'll give investors a bit of a sense of the value proposition and the fact that we are really got a long way to go in terms of improving our market cap over the next year or two. So this is the really most fundamental question, really, is, why South Korea? It's sort of a bit of perhaps a jurisdiction that's flown below the radar screen. Not many people are aware of gold deposits in Korea. Macro picture, one of the reasons that our company likes South Korea is that we believe that North Asia is a part of the world that has seen very little exploration dollars. And it's got nothing to do with the geology. So places like Far Eastern Russia, China, Japan, South Korea, these are all areas which we believe have got fantastic potential just from the geological point of view. However, of course, there are various issues associated with places like Russia and China. And we like to think that South Korea represents a fantastic opportunity given the nature of the country. So we believe it's a sort of an unrecognized part of the planet. You can see there that Minex Consulting have highlighted a number of hotspots globally where gold mines are being found at present. Places like Western Australia, West Africa, of course, these are jurisdictions or places which people are very familiar with in the gold space. However, North Asia, I think, has flown a bit below the radar screen, and we like to think that this will be an area where new world-class deposits will be found in due course. And taking a bit more of a closer look, like zooming in, if you will, to South Korea and why is it geologically interesting? And essentially what it is Korea is a bit of a hybrid of the geology that we see in Japan and the geology that we see in sort of northeastern China. It's not the same as those two jurisdictions. So, for example, the Japanese geology tends to be younger. And of course, where the epithermal mineralization is occurring in Korea is more in Cretaceous rocks rather than sort of the more recent, tertiary rocks. So it's a very different proposition. But the macro tectonic context is a parallel, if you will, what we call a tectonic continuum. And really what we're basically saying to investors is that world-class deposits have been found in China, such as the Jiling deposit, which was announced a few years ago in the Jiangdong Peninsula, big orogenic system, north of 17 million ounces, a massive deposit. And similarly, world-class deposits have been found in Japan. And, Hishikari being perhaps the most famous. And there's good, reason to believe that more of these will be found both in China and Japan, but we like to think also in South Korea because we've got a lot of very strong parallels. So there's huge potential, huge discovery potential in Korea, and we're really the only group that is active there at present. And going to a little bit more of the historic context, and this is perhaps something that people are not familiar with, is that in pre-modern times, places like Korea and Japan were well recognized as sources of gold. And so in sort of more ancient times, if you will, it was a jurisdiction or a country that was identified with gold production. This has been forgotten, of course, and more gold mining probably occurred in the Japanese occupation era in the Second World War. But not a lot of work has been done there. And it's sort of a country where most people haven't really heard the background story. And what we've done as a group is we've brought on board a guy called Doug Kerwin, who was active in Korea back in the day. He brought in a guy called Mike Spadafora. And they worked on Korea for a couple of years before bringing in the Ivanhoe group. And so they were really the first Western geologists to identify epithermal mineralization in country. And you can see there that back in 1988, they were the first to really see this and prove the concept, did a bit of exploration, and were able to basically prove that low sulfidation epithermal systems were indeed present in Korea. And they were literally walking up to outcrops of this stuff that have not actually been defined or explored in the past. Quite a unique situation. Here we have the era when the Ivanhoe group was involved. They found several mines, Unsan, Moisan, and another one called Gasado Island. Indeed, they found a bonanza zone at Unsan, which they mined in the early 2000s. You can see there from the left-hand side of the slide the sort of grades that they were talking about that were mined in the early stages, sort of 600 grams per ton gold, 4,000 silver, bonanza zone grade that was essentially direct shipping ore. So when they mined it, it was straight off to a smelter. And so, quite an unusual situation to be finding deposits like this, given the circumstances. That mine is still operating today. And you might be wondering, well, why didn't Ivanhoe stay there? But basically what happened was they made the discoveries in Mongolia, world-class copper systems, etc. And that really drew the group away from Korea. And they sold their interest, concentrated on Mongolia. And a core part of our story is we've gone back to those geologists, the ones on the slide there. They're all ex-Ivanhoe geologists. We brought them back in, if you will, to have another look at the situation in Korea and sort of reinvigorate the Ivanhoe effort. And that's what we're in the middle of at the moment. So Doug Kerwin, the guy behind, or the brainchild behind the whole thing, joined our board earlier this year. And, we're now up and away, if you will, in terms of having a closer look. We talked about on the first slide there about the sort of company culture, boots on the ground, I call it. It's really a bit old school in some ways. We do detailed mapping. We rock slab all our samples are kind of indexed, and we've got a library of rocks at our core storage facility. It is very old school type work, but we like to think that it's also very high quality work that we're doing, and we're in the middle of a process which I think will really bear dividends in the medium term. Very quickly, you could spend an hour talking about Korea as a jurisdiction. It is pretty amazing. Fantastic infrastructure, a very, very good fiscal system. There's no royalties, very modest tax rate. Access to sites, very straightforward. You literally can fly into Korea and take a high-speed rail down to the south of the country where we've got most of our projects. And, we really feel a bit spoilt in some ways in regard to the kind of physical setting that we're operating in. The tenure is a little bit unusual. It's designed for prospectors in many respects. It probably doesn't suit the majors, gold majors, in terms of how they might operate in country. It certainly suits us as a junior. And the good news is that it's a very transparent system. So it's all registered online. And so, there's no funny business like you can see in some countries of Asia in regard to tenure. So it's one thing that does not keep me up at night. But if there's any investors that are indeed a bit more interested in Korea as a jurisdiction, we have a report on our website which goes into a lot more detail about the country. We're actively drilling. We're very much, this is a big factor, this is a big part of our business. We've been drilling for the balance of this year so far. We're currently drilling at a project called Wolyu, and we have several other projects in the pipeline. So we've got no shortage of drill targets, plenty to work on, and indeed we've just raised funding which will keep the drills turning for the next couple of years. More importantly, you can see at the bottom of the slide there, I've given a quote for a direct drilling cost. It's less than US $130 a metre. That's very, very important, as you know, to get good bang for buck in terms of the money raised, going into the ground and getting some metres drilled. So we're very, very happy with the progress on that front. So watch this space. I don't have a huge amount of time to go into lots of projects in detail. So I'm going to just go to a couple of projects and just give a bit of a flavour for the sort of things that we're looking at. So here's one example. FA is one where we got some encouraging gold results back a few months ago. We've hit two styles of mineralisation there. Narrow vein, high grade stuff. Also very wide, low grade breccia. It's a little bit of an unusual system. We think it could be a breccia-hosted system or a breccia pipe. We're seeing plenty of gold in the system, so it's fertile, extensive alteration. Our first drill program there, this is literally the first holes put into the system, and we hit up to 100 grams per tonne in one hole. So that's not bad for a scout program, if you will. And more importantly, this is the start of a much bigger process, and putting those results into context, this really shows the regional picture. We drilled at a site where the old mine, there was a small mine there that we started our drilling works, but you can see in the regional picture that we've hit, more than 9 grams per tonne in rock chips, more than 1.5 kilometres away. There's, clay mines to the southeast, which is always a very good sign in an epithermal system. So there's plenty of fluid movement here. There's a big picture, if you will, that is unfolding as we work on it. And it also had a fairly large historical alluvial field here. Indeed, an alluvial field which would suggest a lot more gold source, if you will, than what would be implied by the small gold mine. So very, very interesting area. Another example would be this project called Wolyu. This is where we're currently drilling. And, this is where we were in the area because of an old historic mine, a silver germanium mine. And we found another epithermal system to the south of that mine in a mountain, very heavily altered, multiple veins outcropping, very, very good grades, as you can see from those photographs on the bottom right. And so, bonanza grade type grades. And we're now currently drilling that system. We were able to identify high-grade bonanza zones in very small underground workings at the top of the mountain. And we're going in there with the rig and seeing if we can sort of demonstrate scale and prove up, with more than one vein, the right amount of ounces per vertical metre to make this sort of an economic proposition at the end of the day. And then lastly, this is the third and last sort of project type, just to kind of give you a feel for the sort of circumstances we're looking at. Dokcheon is a low sulfidation epithermal vein that we discovered ourselves through sort of greenfields reconnaissance, if you will. And here we've got a very high level epithermal system. We're chipping grade on surface on a couple hundred meters of trike extent. We can trace the structure for at least 600 meters. This thing has never been drilled before, but we're finding good gold grades even on surface, even at this high level. Target is probably at least 200 meters below surface, but we're going to be going in there with the rig shortly, and it'll be very interesting to see what's going on at depth. So sitting behind those sort of three project types is, probably the engine room of our company, which is this project generation work that we do. And the most amazing thing about Korea as a jurisdiction and why we're so excited by it is that as our technical crews go out into these new areas, they're finding new mineral systems every 4 to 6 weeks of field work. And by new mineral systems, I mean we've been able to demonstrate epithermal low sulfidation or intermediate sulfidation epithermal vein systems outcropping at kilometre scale, chipping ore grade at surface in a context which has never been tested before. So most of these projects have never been drilled. So this is almost like an unusual or unique global situation where there's a first-class greenfields opportunity, a little bit like when people went into the Santa Cruz region of Argentina in the early days before it was recognized as an epithermal field. We are at the beginning of that process, if you will, and hence why our technical crew is so excited by the opportunity. And there are just a couple of examples of some of the projects we're working on. We're in the sale process of our joint venture interest with a group called Bluebird. This will release significant value for the company, I believe. You can see there from the enterprise values achieved by Bluebird in London versus us in Australia that there's really quite a bit of value there to release for us. There's an independent expert currently doing a valuation, and Bluebird will be purchasing that 50% for whatever the expert comes up with, which, given our enterprise value, will be value additive no matter what. And everything I've talked about in this presentation up to this point has been our core business, which is on the left-hand side of that presentation slide. The joint venture is really a smaller part of our business, and really it's the exploration that does the business. Lastly, a quick one on the corporate profile front, so you can get a sense of it. We've got just north of 200 million shares on issue and a market cap or an enterprise value in Canadian dollars of about 15 million. We've come off 20% actually in the last couple of days. We're trading around 11 cents a share Australian. So that enterprise value is even lower than what is on that slide. Great major shareholders there. If you have a look at the bottom right, people like Metal Tiger, Crescat Capital joined us just recently. We've raised a lot of money just recently too. That's probably another thing I've got to highlight there. We did a $10 million placement, which is just settling as we speak. And so we're well funded going forward. And then looking at this in the context of our peers, we've got the groups in Japan are probably the closest peers that we have. And you can see there that they enjoy market capitalization, some multiples of Southern Gold's. Notwithstanding, we've got very similar businesses and opportunities. The geology is a little bit different between the two jurisdictions, but the macro exploration picture is very similar. However, I would argue that with our lower drill costs, we can get some pretty good bang for buck as we go forward. Drill pipeline, I won't dwell on that because of time, other than to just highlight the obvious that we've got plenty ahead of us and a very full pipeline. So I might just wrap that up, Andrew, and allow, if we've got a minute, if there are any questions. The strategy is all about South Korea, looking for gold and silver. We're not distracted by any other commodity. It's a unique country. Very little exploration has been done there, so it's an unusual context. We've got some of the best guys in the business, an ex-Ivanhoe team driving the technical side. We did a deal with the Asino Drilling Services company, which is helping us with the drill execution and getting that drill rate right down. And we believe we've got a compelling investment case at the end of the day. We've got a very low market cap and a tiny EV, plenty of cash in the balance sheet, and very good quality shareholders sitting behind it. And that's probably it in a nutshell, Andrew.
All right, no, that's great, Simon, and you've taken us right up to the closing time. Look, Thank you very much for the opportunity for you to present. Red Cloud certainly is excited on what you're doing, and we look forward to seeing the results coming out from the first pass drill phases on a number of grassroots potential discoveries. So thank you very much, Simon.
No worries. Thank you, Andrew. Very good. Cheers for that.